Good morning and welcome everybody to this first online masterclass of the international project Antigone's Pride Performing Society, supported by the Creative Europe program of the European Union, promoted by Eufonia Stragali Teatro in partnership with the Grotowski Institute of Wrocław in Poland, the Foundation of Dance Alicia Alonso of the University of Madrid, Rey Juan Carlos from Spain, the Teatro Zakynthos from Greece, and the University of Salento Department of Engineer from Italy. So welcome to all of you. This first masterclass is indeed a first concrete step into the project actions that will develop around three hybrid residencies that will envisage a first part online with these master classes and a second part in presence. So three master classes that will be held in Spain, in the cities of La Alberca and Salamanca, the title of which is Ecology of Arts, a second residence that will be held in Wrocław and Bratislava, entitled Theater and Conflict, and the third one that will be held in Lecce, in natural parks surrounding the town of Lecce, entitled Social Theater and Gender Equality. The project aims to foster intercultural, eco-sustainable artistic practices involving artists from many countries that will be dedicated to a joint creation and to the realization of a performance entitled Cantica Antigone. And about Antigone, that is the central, at the core of the reflection and of the creative process of the project, we will speak today in this first opening masterclass with two important speakers, Professor Nadia Setti and Professor Andrés Avecedo. Professor Nadia Setti, we're very honored and pleased to have you here. Professor Emeritus of Comparative Literature and Gender Studies at University Paris 8 at the Laboratoire d'études de genre et de sexualité. We are very pleased, Nadia, to have you here. The reflections of Nadia will be around Antigone, a life's voice that cannot be silenced. And before giving the floor to Nadia, I would just like to read a few words from the text of Maria Zambrano, The Tomb of Antigone. It's the chapter of the night. How much noise in the silence night, how much life in my death, how much blood still in my veins, how much heat in those stones, and my heart, as always, runs to meet the shadow as in life. So these are few words from the poetic work and philosophic work of Maria Zambrano. That is a text, a main text of reference for the creative process of Antigone's Pride project. So I'm very glad to give the floor to Professor Nadia Setti, who will introduce us in the wonderfully in the world of the Antigone of Maria Zambrano. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Roberta, Stragli, all the colleagues, and this beautiful possibility to think over and not only this text, I will say, but other that in the meantime I found, of course, because you have given me the idea, and I came back also to Antigone Sophocles. I'm sorry, I will read, or I'll try not to read too academic in an academic way my text, But since it is in English, and since I wanted to just to put a series of questions, that will be I have to read it. So it's not so easy to follow, but of course, I will explain, I will come back for some points if you want that you need it. Okay. So as I told you, my references are, of course, the Antigone of Sophocles and Maria Zambrano, Antigone's Tomb, beautiful text, and some reference to also to performance of this ancient and magnific piece. So I will first give you a series of remarks, general ones, just to see where I'm going to present my remarks. First, we have in this play prevalently horizontal relations over vertical ones. What I mean, sister and brothers. But we remember that before the beginning of a tragedy, there is a fratricide. The two brothers, twins, kill each other. Secondly, what we call vertical relations, there are, of course, power relations, hierarchic, and that I mean, we see it in two main clashes between Creon and Antigone and Haemon, the Creon's sons, and Creon is himself. First, who is Antigone? Well, that's the question all the time. At the beginning, she's just a child, and then a young girl, and only in the discussions with Creon, she is a woman. And this I can say because I could see the Greek text and all the vocabulary in the Greek text that designate Antigones. There are two major clashes in this tragedy. I already said, between Antigone and Creon, the most famous, and between Creon and Haemon, his son. If Creon affirms his power with laws that establish who has to be honored as a hero and who has to be left to the vultures, he also despises deeply and fear women and femininity. Some sentences are very meaningful, but his son, Haemon, is different. He is also confronted with law and escapes through death. So Creon loses his son and is punished twice, in his virility and in his fatherhood. Okay, these ideas I tell at the beginning not to forget them then. And then a series of remarks that seems to be not lateral, but I wanted to give you some of my thoughts. About 123 years ago, Sigmund Freud found the Oedipus complex, the basic concept of psychoanalytic theory. And between 404 and 450 was composed and played Oedipus Rex and Antigone. From that time until today, we have seen on the stage hundreds of performances of this tragedy, every time troubled by these incredible tragic stories. Freud has just tools, has just give us one huge thing, that Oedipus is not just an unhappy man, is just a prototype of humanity. And Antigone, who is Antigone? She is not a concept. There is no complex named after Antigone. What?
Please unmute your microphone, Lucio. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Nadia.
Yes. So I said, before the beginning of this piece, the two brothers killed. And so my first consideration is about wars, disorder, order, eventually peace. And I just want to remember a few references. At the end of the last century, during the Balkans wars, first in Bosnia, then in Kosovo, almost 10 years wars, we asked ourselves in Europe, why war? Warum Krieg? That is the title of a letter of Einstein to Freud. They exchange letters in 1933. We know also that Virginia Woolf, almost in the same time, 1939, wrote Free Guineas, this very famous text, because a Society for Peace asked her to contribute with Free Guineas to promote peace. So just before the beginning of Antigone, just to remember what happened before, two brothers, I underline, fight one against the other for the same issue, to conquer reign over Thebes and to be the only successor of their father, Oedipus. The murder is achieved between members of the same family, born from the same womb, the same mother. This fratricide follows the parricide, Oedipus killing an unknown man who, after inquiry, reveals being his own father, Laius. The same who wanted to have his son killed after the prophecy. Then we know a terrible plague afflicts Thebes, and only the revelation of the author of a murder can end it. As we see, the destiny of holy population of a city, of a reign, is strictly fastened to the family links, kinship relations, and the series of murders between members of the same family, an ethnic community. I wanted to remember at this point the definition of what it is an ethnic conflict, and that I found in an article. Ethnic conflict, a form of conflict in which the objectives of at least one party are defined in ethnic terms, and the conflict, its antecedents, and possible solutions are perceived along ethnic lines. The conflict is usually not about the ethnic differences themselves, but over political, economic, social, cultural, and territorial matters. Ethnic conflict is one of the major threats to international peace and security. Conflicts in the Balkans, Rwanda, Chechnya, Iraq, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Darfur, Israel, West Bank, Gaza Strip are among the best known and these examples from the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The destabilization of provinces, states, and in some cases, even whole regions is a common consequence of ethnic violence. Ethnic conflicts are often accompanied by gross human rights violations, such as genocide and crimes against humanity, and by economic decline, environmental problems, and refuse flows. Violent ethnic conflict leads to tremendous human suffering. Well, you understand why I wanted to remember this point, because of course, in the series of conflicts, we have a recent one with going on and others in the world. So on this point, Antigone's tragedy tells one of the most devastating, crazy truth about war, and we can find many testimonies of this, all the conflict mentioned before. I think that it is extremely difficult to reason about violence at the different levels, in gender relationship, social, national. How can we conceive the violence against women, for example, or genocide? How many guineas or dollars or euros would be collected to stop it? From one side, we could say that this is the condition of tragedy, the conflict, the fight. On the other side, it pushes us to question the relation between individuals, family relationships, and polis, the city, the community. What happens when a series of murders precipitate the city and people, citizens, into chaos, plague, pandemic, disorders, so that some act of salvation has to be done?
Please mute your microphone. Thank you. Sorry, Nadia.
Or from whom this salvation can come? From some god or hero or heroine? Who can save people, the city, the nation, from the worst? You know, this the first question already in Oedipus Rex. So we said, before the beginning of the tragedy, both the brothers, Antiochus and Polyneices, fight and kill each other. Their death ends the war, well, we suppose. Here comes Antigone, after their killing and death. That takes place before the opening of a play. Here she comes, but not alone, and that is my first point. There is immediately her sister, Ismene. So here the beginning of the piece. You are my blood, you are my sister, my dear Ismene. Well, so the first thing we hear is that there were two brothers dead, and there are two sisters living. And there will be only one at the end, with more or less a sister surviving later. Before going further in the reflection, I just want to point to what is the time and the tempo of tragedy. Of course, most of you coming from theater know it perfect, but I want to just think about it. Everything goes very quick, nonetheless. Everything should be told. Everyone knows the characters and the story, but the important thing is to repeat it again and again, so that we have still the chance to try to understand something or what seems impossible to understand. Violence, war, murder, unhappiness, life. And underline, something has to be told and discussed. All the main confrontations, the main clashes between Creon on one side and mostly Antigone and Hymen on the other side, has this strong accent of urgency. On the contrary, Maria Zambrano is interested to the last minute of Antigone's tragedy inside the tomb. And this last minute may last, I say, all the time, because when we think, we try to understand, we need the time. Where she is, where Antigone is definitely alone, and she reveals to herself. And Zambrano, the philosopher, the poet, gives his time to her, to the arising of thought, of consciousness, of life, because the time of action is up, is finished. Now there is another time, and Zambrano helps us to think, to be aside Antigone in this other time. Very important. I think we have to consider these couples of brothers and sisters attentively. Zambrano says many beautiful words about Antigone's solitude. Nonetheless, there is just a moment before this loneliness, absolute, and this time is with a sister. Somehow there is a story between sisters which is still to be told. Just a glimpse of another story, different from a brother's killing. When Antigone takes Ismene's hand in a state of strong emotion, She has already a plan. She wants a sister at her side to give to the other brother, Polyneice, the enemy, a convenient burial, to allow him to join the Mother Earth in peace, as well as Eteocles, considered by Creon the legitimate defender of a town, so that both her brothers may be equally mourned. There will be no peace of the mind of everyone of a community without a regular mourning of both their brothers. Only by this act, violence, murder, war, of all the past of his family could be overcome. So important is for another order to come. And in the first scene of Adel Hakim's production, I remember it was, we can see it on YouTube, as I have done, and it is interpreted by the troupe of the Palestine National Theater. Perhaps you know it. Ismene and Antigone are two young girls. And of course, Antigone is the most passionate and decided. We understand immediately that she will go right to the realization of her idea, and her ethical decision doesn't suffer any compromise. At her side, Ismene is the one who trembles and doesn't dare to go against Creon's law. In a sense, one, Antigone, completes the other, Ismene, about the standard of humanity. If we ask ourselves, who is the more human? The one who, full of her sense of duty and love, is ready to die, or the one who is afraid for the consequences of their act? Ismene will change her idea later and support her sister, but at this moment, she hesitates. Well, in my opinion, both, they reveal something of our humanity. But we can conceive also this couple decision and indecision as a moral dilemma, similar to what Carol Gilligan, in her famous A Different Voice, 1982, she compares, rather, the answers given by a group of children, of young children, girls and boys, to a series of moral dilemmas. It's the way she calls them. The basic stories they had to think about is about saving someone, even if it meant to transgress the law. What is more important, to save a human life or to become a thief and eventually be condemned to jail? This is the moral dilemma it was submitted to these children. Resuming Gilligan's long analysis of the responses, girls tried to find ways in a more complex situation. Boys were more direct. To steal was admitted to save the person who was ill. I just quote a short paragraph because, of course, that will be a matter of a long speech, but I think we would read it, we should read it in a more extensive way, but we have no time to do it. So I quote, both children thus recognize the need for agreement, but see it as mediated in a different ways. He impersonally through systems of logic and law, she personally through communication in relationship. Okay, this is, I think this is something we must think of the beginning of how to think difference. Okay, and that I think is something it is in the play of Sophocles. These possibilities facing to what is to do or not to do. Of course, on the stage in a tragedy, there is no time for heroine, but there are speeches and quite violent fights at clashes. Nonetheless, I think that this beginning with the two sisters and their dialogue is as important as the face-to-face of Antigone and Creon. And we understand also why Virginia Woolf in the no less famous Free Guineas quotes Antigone's argument in the notes of their book. The writer doesn't develop her analysis, but if you think it over, her arguments to refuse a Guinea, even if she wants peace and not war, are near Antigone's position based on kinship and love. Since she loves both her brothers, she would mourn both in the same way. War hasn't been a brother's affair. Men have done war. Why women should support it? War has been a brother's affair. That's the argument of Virginia Woolf. Men have done always war. Why women should support it? This is Virginia Woolf answer is in a certain kind of sisterhood, you know, the famous society of outsiders, who will never kill each other because they don't belong anymore to this or that group or nation to a point to fight one against the other. Okay, this is to say that position of Virginia Woolf, of course, is a reflection after Antigone. Well, if the twins fighting and killing each other have repudiated their common womb, their mother's body, and kinship, what is going to do their sister? She doesn't want to double their division and hate. She joins in a certain way. She repairs the division, the hate. She takes up the bodies united in a common body, the earth. She covers her brother's body with the earth and pours water. This is the execution of a ritual, but it is evident that its meaning is to allow the body to recover the belonging to the maternal body. I come back to Zambrano because on this point she goes farther. Her Antigona pours water over the dry blood of her brother to allow it to liquefy and penetrate the earth in a kind of restitution of life. I can't quote this passage, which is absolutely beautiful, but I think we'll speak of it in another time. Then in her last desperate speech, Antigone's Sophocles reminds that she was the one who accomplished the ritual for her mother's dead corpse. She was at the deepest side until his disappearing. And now she's the only one who can practice this office, this ritual for her brother. We may think that her role or function is to allow the passing from life to death, the only guarantee for the dead to be received on the other side, along with the Greek system of underworld forbidding this act. Creon forbids an essential function of Antigone as a devoted sister and a daughter. Zambrano speaks of a relation of Antigone with the transcendental. What does it mean? In my opinion, essentially, this is her familiarity with the borders of life and death. She is an in-between. From a gender point of view, she's not yet accomplished as woman, since only promised to nuptials with Haman. Now we could ask, which is really the status of a young woman in Greece? In his hate speech, Creon is very violent against women. He can't renounce to this decision because that will mean to surrender to a woman. And this is impossible for a man and a king. But as a kore, a young woman, a paidos, is it the same? Before saying, going further, I just remember that in the Greek text, we have a series of words, and at the beginning, it is very frequent to find the term paidos. Well, of course, I pronounce it not exactly, but well, excuse me. That is the in French, l'enfant, the child. You know, there is no determination in terms of gender. It is when once, of course, when it is a question of a promise of Aemon, she is the nymphea, she is the fiancée, and then in all the end of the piece, finally the way it's they used is gunei, that means woman. So in the text, she becomes, all along, she transforms. And even if she is not married, she will become a woman in face of Creon. Well, this is, I think, something which has to be deepened, but because it is very important. Now, I will just remind a few considerations about what is the sacrifice of young girls in the theater. We know some of them. Iphigenia, of course, Agamemnon and Clytemnestra's daughter, who is sacrificed to Artemis, the virgin goddess, who promised the victory to the Greek army to allow, so she is sacrificed to allow the departure of the Greek fleet toward Troy, and the war it follows. There are other very interesting examples of young girls who are sacrificed or offer themselves to be sacrificed for the victory of their people during the war. They obtain a special status, they become glorious as the young men who died for their country. Antigone claims for this glory, the name is Kleos. What is the more glorious than to give a tomb for her brother, to bury him along with proper rituals? And she adds, everyone agrees with that, but everyone is afraid of a punishment of a tyrant, of Creon. So if from one side, this time between childhood and puberty, marriage and maternity is a dangerous one, young girl can be raped before marriage. On the other side, in wartime, they may gain a status equivalent to warriors. Why their sacrifice is so important? It has to be avoided for a very evident reason, because the future of a polis depends on them, on young girls, on their marriage and on the children, future soldiers of a country. You know, it's always the same reason. Differently from the young girl dead prematurely before, Antigone has a name. She's not only a chore. In fact, chore indicates the kinship, the daughter, Parthenos, virgin, the young girl before marriage. As Louise Brut-Zeidman explains in an article in French, Le temps des jeunes filles dans la cité grecque, young girls' time in a Greek city, Chore Parthenos had not a real voice in the Greek polis. Maria Zambrano affirms that Antigone is the most impressive example of a Greek religious conscience, what she calls the passion of a daughter. But I say this daughter is also in the same time a sister and of her father and of her brothers. In Oedipus Rex, she's the devout daughter of her blind father, and in Antigone, the devoted sister of her brother. Zambrano is not confounding Christian religion with ancient Greek religion, but trying to think about the sacrifice of Antigone. Antigone, who kills herself as other daughters, last ring of a series of victims of a nation fought, you know, the family of Antigone and Oedipus. In her case, she's not as the son of God the Father, who with his sacrifice redeems humanity. That is, there is this comparison in the mind, I think, of Zambrano. Rather, she puts an end to a major disorders, a series of crime or parricide, and to not a justice, an injustice order. In this perspective, Antigone's speech and argument are much more impressive. Even if she speaks for her brother cursed by his father, for her brother dead body, for his second life in the underworld, she can't bear the idea of her brother wandering eternally on earth instead of going to the underworld. Disorder is what all of this family has known from the beginning. Antigone wishes to be one thing, to do one thing, establishing divine order along with divine law and the guest civil law, dictated, I remember, by the angel of Creon. So I repeat, Antigone's great concern is that the body of her brother would not be just merely flesh exposed to the vultures. So is concerned with his body. Without honorable burial, his body is reduced to an animal, a prey of other animals. On the other side, if Antigone's body will not engender, bear children to a husband, and continue to the lineage, the corpse of her brother, of course, is always at the center of all decision. And I say, I'm very interested. For Creon, the enemy's body is less than a corpse, is a matter abandoned to decomposition and outrage of all the elements. For Creon, it is the enemy's body, and no other consideration will prevail with this idea. I'm very interested to Zambrano remarks about brotherhood and sisterhood. Antigona is the absolute sister. She calls her auto adelpha. In the Greek text, the pure one without crime and bringing the others crime. The philosopher creates a character where we find some major concepts of her philosophy, but this new character is something else. So since Antigone's conscience is born into the tomb, it is a beginning. In a way, she auto-creates herself out of the womb, that is her tomb in a spiritual way. At this point, being left without brother and sister, Zambrano calls her then auto-adelpha. She is to herself all the sisters and brothers. Addressing directly to my tomb, she says, and this is Zambrano, I try to translate it. You are my cradle, my nest, my house. I know that you will open, and in the meantime, you will let me listen to your music. I always wanted to hear the voice of a stone. End quotation, quote. In Sophocles' Antigone, we find her invocation to the tomb. It is the last monologue, to the tomb as a nuptial room, as a prison. So Zambrano writes a own monologue, but it is pronounced inside the tomb, where Antigone lives not her last moments of her life, but, says Zambrano, all her life. I quote, I am alone here with my entire life, as I had to be born from this tomb. End quotation. This life is out of kinship, free from the first time of her heritage, having accomplished all her duty of piety. If we read all this tragedy as a clash between two sides, that's war, then on one side there is the tutor of the law, Creon, who makes the law and orders execution. But Antigone speaks as well. She speaks well, I should say. She speaks duty. She acts because she has to do it, along with an order of a world on earth and under earth, a relationship piety. And because of this feeling, which is not only a feeling related to the blood's links, she united what is violently scattered. Against the law that has to distinguish between friend and enemy, ami et ennemi, we say in French, we can treat with the same honor, piety and your supporter, and the opposite. One thing more, probably the most important. In the middle, there are two bodies. For Antigone, they are on the earth together, side by side, the two brothers. She's not a diplomat. She doesn't come to Thebes to negotiate peace. Anyway, it is too late. But she can offer to everyone another possible idea of humanity and the order of the world. If only the body may be treated as a human body, a loved one, so that the soul, the spirit, may go to the other side safe. Then we could ask ourselves, what about her body, the woman's body, the young girl virgin, the one who will not accomplish gender performance, nor submit to cruel punishment? She performs another act of her own hand, as her mother Jocaste before. She hangs herself. Is it a way, without words, to perform a relation to her mother, and secondly, to her brothers? They are all brothers, Oedipus as well, as we know. Nicole Laureau, famous historian, has written beautiful and deep analysis about the tragic ways to kill a woman, façon tragique de tuer une femme. It was translated into English. Along with Laureau, hanging is a feminine way of dying. On a general standard, is a shameful one. It is the very expression of femininity. So Antigone, strangled by her own veil, is the equivalent of the emblem of her sex. Veils, scarves, bells are seduction machines, early transformed in suicide tools. I'm summing up Laureau words. No bloodshed, as for a warrior who dies in a fight or commits suicide with his own sword. Bloodshed by the split, the rip of a wound. The sword is the symbol of a manly, heroic death. Laureau quoted him on suicide, splitting his own blood like a true man. It seems that the name of Haemon comes from Haima, that is blood. In any case, there is no shame in this hard act. But Antigone gives herself death as a woman or as a man. Is she a victim or an heroine? Here comes a Laureau concept of brouillage, muddle, blur, about traditional codes, and that she speaks about Sophocles. So that the state, she states an equivalence between rope and word. And there I quote, or I think I will not read this French one, but I will read a sort of a translation I found. A man never would he have made it up, hang himself. For a woman, on the contrary, there is a choice, either to look for a true feminine death by the knot of the rope, or steal to men their death. Identification, internal coherence of a tragic character. There is an imbalance, a moment of disequilibre. Women is more authorized to make the men to die than a man to appropriate the feminine behavior. Tragic freedom of women, freedom in death. This is an interrogation of Nicole Laureau. So this point of brouillage, muddle. Something is not exactly as should be. Something, there is a possibility of just mix up gender roles in this distinction between what is a man death and what is a woman's death, and of course in the case of suicide. So if Antigone achieves her status or woman identity by this feminine way of killing herself, the consequences of her act and of Haemon's suicides at her side are that of a hero. And while Creon is devastated, he survives to his son and his wife's suicides, and he loses his power over himself. So in a final view, power and law bring to death and shame, and have catastrophic effects over the polis. What tell us this tragic end? There is no more a king, no heritage, no savior coming to rescue the kingdom of Denmark, or Phoebus in this tragedy. I'm rather perplexed about the interpretation of Antigone's suicide as a confirmation of her belonging to the feminine gender and the oikos space. Everyone has really performed her own gender. Remember, it is a kind of refrain. Here is Antigone's argument. Speaking with her, Creon is menaced to become a woman, since she speaks like a man. She has logic and arguments to oppose to Creon's power and law. So I leave the last word to Nicole Leroux. Along with her, Nicole Leroux, Antigone is an exception. She's not a virgin sacrificed, or grieving wife or mother having lost her son. That's the case of Eurydice, the Aemon mother. She gains twice, inventing her own way of dying, and by condemning Creon to blemish he wanted to avoid. Moreover, she performs her nuptials in her own way. That's why Zambrano, in fact, it was I leave to her the last consideration, may consider that Antigone meet with herself through a complete consciousness of her story or her family story and life, in a sort of second birth, even if she affirms to go back to all the members of her family who have preceded her in the underworld. And with this consideration, I will stop my presentation.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for your so interesting, deep and inspiring reflections that really touch our lives through Antigone, makes us in connection and in the creative process, but also in our concrete lives with the Antigone's heart. Thank you so much, Nadia. Just before giving the floor to Professor Avecedo, I will give the floor to Fabio Toledi, that who wanted to tell something on yes, your contribution.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me very well, also because my voice is not working today. Okay, but in any case, I would like to underline some elements very important, because we have asked to Nadia Setti to present this first masterclass, because it's very important, her contribution for us. We have met her working on NN6U some years ago, and we continue to have this relationship that is very important for us. And also we have the confirmation in this presentation also, because of course, for many different reasons, in the work, theatrical work of Astragali Teatro, we have usually developed the central dimension of women, and also in this case we are working about the figure of Antigone. Also in the title of the masterclass, we define Antigone not like a character, it's not a personage, but Antigone for us is a myth. Is a completely different approach, this one. And also we can consider the myth like an instrument, is an open instrument that need to create always an opportunity to open other opportunities too. And also I think that the speech of Nadia, it's very, very strong and important. Also, I have a lot of questions, of course, on this, but we have, after the opportunity to ask something, for example, I think that one element very important is connected also because Nicole Louro is very important for us, for our work, and also the figure of Stasis, for example, is central in our work. What is the idea of the civil war? What is the dimension of the brotherhood and sisterhood in the dimension of a war that is a civil war? I think that is a very important opportunity also in the historical condition that we are living. If you are not able to consider every war all over the world like a civil war, we enter in the dynamic of the conflict among states, among the enemies and friends, and so on. Also, I think that it's very important, this point of view that we always try to create and to face also in these delicate moments, some aspects. Also, when we have worked more than 20 years on Antigone, working always on the Maria Zambrano, and also the starting point is the point of Maria Zambrano like a woman that was in exile, and also is a starting point that I think also in this moment it's very important to consider. And also for this, I want to thank Nadia for his intervention.
Thank you, Fabio, and thank you very much, Nadia, again, Nadia Setti. And now I'm very pleased to give the floor to Professor Andrés Avecedo, actor, choreographer, director, professor at the Institute of Dance Alicia Alonso of Rey Juan Carlos University of Madrid, and to thank also Luisa Gerrena and Alberto Garcia Castaño of the Foundation of Dance Alicia Alonso, that is partner in the project, for the involvement of Professor Acevedo, and for the upcoming residence in Spain, in Salamanca and La Alberca, about which we are so happy. So Professor Acevedo will speak about the importance of the versions of contemporary authors from classical myths to update the great themes of the Greek tragedies. A special focus will be on Bertolt Brecht Antigones and Itziar Pascal's Antigone. Please, Professor Acevedo, thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Fabio and Astragali Teatro. Thank you, Professor Nadia, for such an inspiring speech. Thank you. Well, I'm going to read, I'm sorry. I'm going to also read because the original lecture is on Spanish, and I'm going to go straight to the point. The first thing that I would like to say is that this is a presentation of a research that we are holding with my colleague, Jorge Gallego. I'm going to speak in the name of both. Well, the second important thing is that this is a practical research. We are asking ourselves and researching about the theatrical mechanism to use a classical drama to talk about something important in our contemporary world. So I'm going to point the mechanism used by two different playwrights, as you said, Itziar Pascual and Bertolt Brecht, to transfer this collective idea from the original drama in two particular contexts. So I'm going to talk about the version, of course, of Bertolt Brecht from 1947. This one, less known, the Antigone by Itziar Pascual, published in 2018. So maybe this is less known. Well, Antigone shows us the most universal subject that classic Greek theater gave us, which is this fight between duty and law. And from this main opposition come many secondary issues like the individual belief against communality, or individual rights against the law set by the police or the state. Antigone, for us, means rebellion. So actually, Antigone is the first story, or maybe the original story, about rebellion, and the rest of the theater and the literature comes from this very first conflict of the rebellion, right? This classic myth became one of the most adapted by playwrights and directors throughout the story of performing arts. That's the case of Bertolt Brecht or Itziar Pascual, who used the tragedy of Antigone to build two completely different dramas, two plays absolutely different, made under the sign of their own theater, right? Brecht turns the tragedy into an example, or the example with mother courage, of epic theater. It means a drama with an ethical and a political commitment. And Itziar Pascual, on the other hand, which is a very important feminist, Itziar Pascual turned the story into a drama full of hope, like highlighting the possibility of another ending for Antigone. Like in all her theater, in Pascual's theater, in Antigone, she expressed her feminist commitment. So she displays the struggle of women against men's injustice. Like Professor Nadia talked about Virginia Woolf in Three Guineas, right? Under the same sign, which is very interesting to relate the two classes. And so with Jorge, we wonder about the adaptation mechanism that both playwrights used to transform the original drama by Sophocles and build their versions with those very clear purposes. Sorry, is the sound okay? Okay, I carry on then. So in Antigone, Bertolt Brecht takes the myth to show an historical event suffered by the writer himself. So the main purpose is to make a reflection on the power of the individual as a transforming agent to the history. So this is actually the main objective of Brecht epic theater, how individual man can be transformer of the history, right? So those elements of the original tragedy of Sophocles' Antigone that could move to the catharsis, to the pity or fear, as well as everything which is related to the fatum, to the unbreakable destiny of man, are displays of the version. So instead, we find a human being, a woman, a young woman who faces tyranny and the injustice caused by another man, not by God. And she doesn't do it for her own sake. Her freedom will benefit everyone. So that's the first very important point, right? In Brecht's version, the play opens with a meaningful prologue. So most of you know, of course, the setting, the first line, the setting of the scene, quote, Berlin, April 1945, which places us in a very crucial moment, right? This is the end of near to the end of the Second Worldwide War. So in that first setting also indicates that it happened at dawn, which is like the symbolism, even if it's epic theater, the symbolism is present in the very first line. Because with dawn, Brecht put us, the audience, and the play in the beginning at the door, and at the door of something new, just as Antigone in the door of Creon's palace, right? So this scene presents two sisters that we can read and understand as Antigone and his men, even if they have no names, who discover outside their house, that they just hang a deserter soldier, and that we can understand that is his brother. One of the sisters wants to go out and cut the rope and bring him into the house, and the other stop her. We also have this double-edged soldier that asks them if they know the dead soldier. So the ending of the very first scene is up in the air. I'm going to read just the last sentences of the very beautiful scene. The first sister said, "I look at my sister. Should she, on pain of death, go now and free our brother, who may be dead or no? He had only one desire, to live." So in this first scene, we can see many distancing mechanisms from the epic theater. The first sister is telling the story at the same time as she's living the story. So time and space become strange, multiple, not very defined, not defined at all, I should say. So this character will not appear again in the play, but however, they have already fulfilled their mission in the drama. So in the reading of the play, we will see Creon and the fall of Thebes as Hitler and Germany. So the double reading is for the whole play, right? There is another interesting modification in the respect to the original by Sophocles that served to go further into this identification of Creon as Hitler. In the confrontation with Antigone, as well as in the confrontation with Hemon, with Creon's son, Brecht show Creon as a human being moved only by the thirst of power, unable to show weakness, even facing his family, or even facing a wise man as Tiresias. That's not the case in Sophocles' drama. He's kind of right. Sometimes he's weak and moved by the love for his son, for instance. And those elements Brecht erase from the play. That's very interesting. In Sophocles, Creon asked for advice for Tiresias, and for the very first scenes, the encounter, he showed a lot of respect for this wise man, and it's just the opposite in Brecht's version. In the first scene, he addresses to Tiresias like, "You," I don't know exactly the quote, I mean, I don't have it here, like, "You, old man, fool, what do you have to say?" Which is like the opposite, right? There's another few changes in the fable that also help to extreme this version of Creon. In Brecht's play, he's a tyrant. He kills Polynices. He kills him from behind because Polynices flees from the battlefield after seeing his brother, Eteocles, dead. So they don't kill each other. That's the main difference, right? This fact already showed the character of Creon as a cruel ruler who sent men to their death or eliminates those who oppose to him. So there's another change, perhaps maybe smaller, but very important, is that Creon is engaged in an offensive war, so an invasion of foreign territories. He's not defending Thebes. He's attacking. He's in offensive. He's in invasion, just like the Hitler's Germany. There is a few more modification to the original by Sophocles that serve to delve into the identification of Creon as Hitler. This opposition with Antigone and with Antigone, as well as with his son, we talk about this confrontation with Tiresias and this offensive war. Maybe the end of the play, we can talk a little bit, because at the end, not at in Sophocles, Brecht avoid any sentimentalism or pathos. He just presents a chain of death and the character of Creon accepting his end in a very cold way and announcing that Thebes will fall with him. So the elder closed the play with a chorus that would be as valid for Thebes, for the Thebes narrated by Sophocles, as for the Germany of 1945. This is just 4 lines, but I'm gonna quote, because this is the end of the play. They say, Creon went to the city whose downfall was imminent. We follow him in death. The feast that dominated us, it was cut off, so he wouldn't hit again. So Bertolt Brecht proposes a reflection from the pain of his life, who has known exile, just as Maria Zambrano, right? And the destruction of his home country. He writes from the impotence of observing. So he writes his own story, the one of the people who lives their country in the hands of the dictator, that at first time they took for a savior. But he writes in the hope that the spirit of the human being can develop to not repeat mistake from the past and walks towards a society more free and fair. And for that, of course, he chose theater as the weapon. So now I'm gonna talk about some mechanism in Itziar Pascual version that she subtitled "The Tragedy of Fraternity." The scene from the classic drama follows a prologue in which the actor, the cast, speak direct to the audience to make them see that Antigone's future is in our hands. In that way, the premise of the conflict are displaced. It's not just about the fight between the law of men and the law of gods, but it's also a challenge to try to discover if there is another way to understand the world. So there is another possible ending for Antigone. And Itziar Pascual is asking the audience, no matter when, in 2018 or in 20 years. So this thread of hope frames not only the first scene, but is the subject of the play. It's also one of the intimate aspects of each character. There is a chorus integrated by dead characters, dead people of the fable, that in some way make the myth reborn, so the audience can judge and decide if there is any possible hope. No, this hopeful aspect is also present in a few original scenes added to the ones from the original play. Such, for instance, there is a scene which is men dreams And then in the dream, Iphicles and Polynices, the brother, meet, find themselves in the wall of death, embrace under the forgiveness of the two brothers. So they are in peace. Antigone, in the first in first place, sorry, is the tragedy with a name of a woman, with a woman's name, and so there is something to say with feminism, and Theodore Pascual is in that line. Even if it's not the main subject in the original play, they're talking about the role of women in society, in a society of men. And Theodore Pascual theater, all her theater, seeks to give a voice to those who do not have one. For instance, Penelope, the myth, and also here with Antigone and with another characters. So through monologues, we can observe how the playwright gives us a deep vision about Antigone's thought on her family, her thoughts, her doubts, her thoughts about the meaning of love. Is very deep in the thoughts of a woman. So from this point of view, we also see Eurydice, Creon's wife, who has no voice in the original play by Sophocles. There is a scene where Eurydice speaks to Jocasta's shadow, which is another voice from the past, and another woman's voice. So in that scene, this confrontation between Eurydice leads to confrontate her husband, asking for clemency for Antigone. This is nothing to do with the original plays, right? In that scene, in the original drama, happened between Tiresias and Creon, and here there is a woman trying to save Antigone. So that way, the playwright gives Eurydice a voice that will be silenced by Creon, you know, who, besides being a tyrant to the people, is unable to listen to those women. You know. I'm going to say just two sentences from Pascual's drama. I quote. Eurydice says, "What do men know about justice?" And Creon said, "Men, I don't know. Women, nothing." And that's something. So in the final scenes, the final scene brings back to this style that we find in the prologue, in the beginning of the play, where the actor reminds the audience one more time that the ending of the tragedy can be replaced for a different one that, I quote, doesn't hurt women so much. An ending with less death, but at the same time, a reminder of the pain of what happened in our history. The playwright says through her characters that, I quote, "We will continue writing Antigones until the police, the people, stop encouraging revenge, anger, and killing, until the day when Antigone can return to the world of the living without fear, just like a little girl." So, however, this image of hope through the symbol of the girl moves responsibility back to the audience. Now Antigone's fate is in their hands, or I should say in our hands, right? So it depends on us that that girl who could live anywhere, grows up in freedom, or that history repeats. Yeah. So I'm going to finish here. We just point a few different mechanisms in to save the original play with all the value that it has, and try to speak about something important in our contemporary world in this very moment. So I guess the question is open to the present. Which Antigones we should stage today? Maybe a new one, maybe a mix. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Avecedo. It's very inspiring, very important. You touched very important playwrights like Brecht play of Antigone, which is really so important in this line into the contemporary. Talking also about playwrights in exile, like Maria Zambrano, as it was, as you said, also Bertolt Brecht. And also I find some similarities between Maria Zambrano and Isia Pasquale's play in this presence of the voices and in this recalling to individual and collective responsibility. So much important. Thank you so much. I think this first part, we can close this first part. I would like very much to thank Professor Nadia Setti and Professor Andrés Avecedo, and also Professor Jorge Gallego, who is contributing to this important research that we hope we can deepen also in these future days of co-working for Antigone's Pride project. Thanks again to the Foundation of Dance, Alicia Alonso, for collaborating to this first masterclass online, and to the residents in Spain that will see all this group of artists that are participating via Zoom, that will see them involved, coming from different countries, that will see them involved in the residence in Spain. Fabio, I don't know if you wanted to say something as an end before we close our live streaming and we skip to the second part for Zoom participants.
We can skip to the second part.
Okay, so we go to the second part, and I would like just to remind about the second masterclass for our audience in live streaming at 5 p.m. About augmented reality techniques for the performing arts, that will be coordinated by the Augmented and Virtual Reality Lab of University of Salento. So thank you very much to the audience, and see you in the afternoon with second masterclass.